The wireless mapping fence allows you to customize your pet's boundary by programming the shape and location of your boundary. The wireless mapping fence may be used with a privacy fence if you have problems with your pet digging under the fence or if you'd like to keep your pet away from an area in the yard. You can easily download this boundary into any number of receiver collars. Installation is easier than you think. In no time, you and your furry pal will be ready to enjoy your yard together. Before you think about where you'd like to set up your boundary, you should begin with charging the receiver collar, so it'll be ready to program. To charge the receiver collar, lift the rubber plug. Plug the receiver charger into the receiver charge jack on the receiver collar. These are keyed to fit one way, so do not force it in backwards. Plug the receiver collar charger into a standard AC wall outlet. The receiver collar light will glow red when connected properly. The light will turn green when the charge is complete in about 2 to 3 hours. The receiver collar must be fully charged before programming a boundary. To begin setting up your containment system, first decide how you would like to customize your layout and where you'd want to keep your pet. Do you want your pet to have access to the front and backyard or just one area? A full boundary completely encircles the house and fence transmitter located within the house. A partial boundary usually has a starting point or ending point located at house corners or up against an outside wall. Create a sketch of the layout that you'd like to set up in your yard. For this layout, we're choosing a partial boundary layout. When deciding where to place your transmitter, remember it needs to be located indoors within the area you want to contain. You will eventually be programming boundary flags to represent your boundary. Each boundary flag will need to be located between 15 feet and 90 feet from the transmitter. Each boundary flag must have a unique radial line or view of the transmitter. No flag may block another flag's line to the transmitter. The positioning of the transmitter is critical to the performance of this system. After some testing, the transmitter will need to be mounted as any slight change to the transmitter position would change the boundary. If the transmitter was accidentally bumped, it could cause a variance to your layout. If you choose a partial boundary, the first and last boundary flag must be located within 1 foot of the physical boundary, such as the house, privacy fence, or a wall. For partial boundaries, the transmitter should be at least 10 feet away from the entry door where the pet will exit and enter the home. Please note the following guidelines when considering where to place your transmitter. Do not mount the transmitter within 5 feet of large metal surfaces, such as refrigerators and washers or dryers. Do not place the transmitter on a metal surface, such as a metal shelf or metal table. Do not locate the transmitter closer than 10 feet from water heaters and furnaces. If the transmitter will be within 10 feet of metal overhead garage doors, place it close to the ceiling. Place at least 2 feet above the roof of any parked vehicle in the garage. Do not mount the transmitter within 2 feet of a concrete floor or adjacent to metal HVAC ductwork. You should also avoid electrical service panels or main wiring trunks due to the large concentration of house wiring. This could cause distortion. Any buried utility lines such as power, cable TV, phone, or metal water lines must not run parallel with the boundary unless separated from the boundary by at least 15 feet. Because they are not buried as deeply, cable TV or phone lines usually cause more problems than power and water lines. This may require using a partial layout to avoid this potential interference problem. Always avoid crossing buried lines at points far away from the transmitter. If it is required for the boundary to cross a buried utility line, it should cross at a right angle, and it is preferable to cross as close to the transmitter as possible, but not closer than the 15-foot minimum. Before we permanently mount the transmitter to the wall, we're going to perform a couple of tests to make sure we're all clear for this installation. For testing purposes only, you can place the transmitter on some cardboard boxes or on a wooden or plastic shelf in close proximity to where you want to permanently mount it. Slide the receiver mounting bracket on the receiver collar, making sure that the arrow on the receiver mounting bracket is pointing toward the receiver collar PetSafe logo. Snap each section of the receiver handle to form a long pole. Orient the receiver handle so that the arrow on the receiver handle is pointing up. Determine the height of your dog's neck above the ground and snap the receiver mounting bracket on the receiver handle to match the height of your dog's neck. If you have more than one dog, match the height of your dog's neck using the shortest dog's measurements. The Boundary Programming Unit, or the BPU, is a handheld device that is used to program a boundary into the receiver collar. Remove the back cover from the BPU, insert one 9-volt battery, and replace the back cover. Plug the Boundary Programming Unit into the receiver collar's charge jack. Then, locate the BPU's on-off switch on top next to the cable exit location and turn it on. The BPU will automatically go into the test mode main menu when turned on. The test mode allows you to test potential boundary flag locations and to make sure the flags meet the requirements for proper operation. First, verify that the flag locations are within range limits of the system. Place the corner flags at the minimum and maximum distance points of your desired boundary and test these flags to be sure they are within the acceptable 15 to 90 feet from the transmitter. Point the arrow on the receiver mounting bracket in a direction away from the transmitter. Stand still with the receiver collar while testing these corner flags. The BPU will show the distance of each flag in feet from the transmitter. When you've determined that these corners are acceptable, you may move the boundary scan mode on the BPU. A boundary scan is used to check for buried wires and possible interference that may require you to move your boundary location or transmitter location. With the BPU connected to the receiver collar, select Test Mode, then Boundary Scan Mode. Start at Flag 1, moving clockwise around the transmitter. Walk the entire boundary with the arrow pointing in the direction that you are walking. As you walk the boundary, listen for change in tones from a steady tone to a more rapid tone. The screen on your BPU will also indicate good or bad locations. If the scan shows 3 or less for longer than a 10-foot section of the boundary, there could be buried wires or possible interference. You should either adjust your boundary flags or consider moving your transmitter. When the scan mode checks out OK throughout the entire boundary, you may proceed with mounting the transmitter. Remove the bracket from the transmitter. Position the transmitter where you can read the PetSafe logo in the proper orientation. Using the screws and mounting anchors provided, drill holes and mount the bracket to the wall. Slide the transmitter over the bracket. Plug the transmitter into a functional AC wall outlet. Slide the power switch up to turn the transmitter on. The maximum number of flags the system will accept is 128. The minimum number of flags a full boundary requires is 40. The minimum number of flags a partial boundary requires is 10. Fill in the remaining flags using the following guidelines. Flags within 30 feet of the transmitter should be spaced approximately 3 feet apart. Flags between 30 and 70 feet from the transmitter should be spaced about 4 feet apart. Flags greater than 70 feet from the transmitter should be placed 4 to 5 feet apart. Keep in mind each flag must have a unique, straight path to the transmitter, and the paths must not cross. To program your boundary, plug the boundary programming unit into the receiver collar's charge jack. Then, locate the BPU's on-off switch on top next to the cable exit location and turn it on. Select either full boundary or partial boundary. You will collect boundary data at each flag location, starting with flag 1 at the start of the boundary and moving clockwise around the transmitter. With the BPU in programming mode, start at flag 1 and program each flag. Verify each flag is accepted before moving to the next flag. The BPU will show the distance of each flag in feet from the transmitter. The range will be displayed if the flag is accepted. If a flag fails, an error menu will indicate why. Follow the directions on the BPU display and be sure to point the arrow on the receiver mounting bracket away from the transmitter. While acquiring the boundary data at each flag, the receiver should not be moved. Following all programming of the flags, the BPU will instruct you to move to your reference point, which is a location that can easily be remembered and is permanent. For example, you may choose to use the corner of a sidewalk or driveway. The reference point should be located between 20 and 90 feet from the transmitter and within the boundary. The boundary data will be calculated once the programming is complete. When the BPU displays it is finished, you may disconnect it from the receiver collar and turn the BPU off. When disconnected from the BPU, the receiver collar will beep twice, then shut down. Press and hold the mode button down until 2 beeps sound and a green LED comes on. Release the button. The receiver is now on. Take the receiver collar around the boundary and verify that the boundary is working correctly. Leave the receiver collar on the receiver handle while doing this, and always move the collar in the direction of the white arrow. Don't move it back and forth like a pendulum. Do not walk or move the receiver collar backwards. Approach a section of the boundary from the pet area and verify that the collar emits the warning tone. This will vary slightly, but should be close to the boundary flag location. 1 to 5 feet beyond the boundary flag's location, the receiver activates the run-through stimulation level. The warning zone width is adjustable using the System Settings menu in the BPU. The warning zone width default settings is average, approximately 3 feet warning distance. The minimum setting is 1 foot warning distance. The max setting is 5 feet warning distance. The receiver collar generates 3 separate tones to assist you in determining the receiver activation status. The low frequency tone indicates a warning, the mid-frequency tone indicates anti-linger, and the high-frequency tone indicates run-through static correction. Make sure your collar does not tone in the area where your pet should be free to play. If you have difficulty hearing the tones, the lights on the receiver collar will indicate the status. Fast pulsating green indicates warning. Fast pulsating red indicates anti-linger static correction and run-through static correction. The flags are the visual tool for your dog to learn the boundary area. After you have trained your pet, you will gradually remove the flags after the pet monitoring phase of the training. After about 15 seconds of anti-linger or normal static correction, the receiver collar will enter a timeout condition, and you must allow for a full 10 seconds recovery time and be backed inside the pet area before the receiver collar will again respond to the boundary. If the receiver collar fails to detect the boundary, then timeout is likely the cause. Wait 10 seconds and try again. When testing the boundary, the receiver collar will skip the warning tone and go straight to anti-linger tone unless the receiver collar has been back in the pet area for a full 10 seconds since the last instance of anti-linger or static correction toning. Proper fit and placement of your receiver collar is important for effective operation and training of this system. The contact points must have direct contact with your pet's skin on the underside of her neck. Your receiver collar comes with short contact points installed. Use the long contact points for pets with long or thick hair. Check the tightness of your contact points on a weekly basis. If you need to tighten them by hand. Make sure the receiver is turned off. Start with your pet standing comfortably. Make sure the PetSafe logo is upright, facing your dog's chin. Center the contact points underneath your pet's neck, touching the skin. Check the tightness of the receiver collar by inserting one finger between the end of the contact point and your pet's neck. The fit should be snug but not constricting. Allow your pet to wear the collar for several minutes, then recheck the fit. Before trimming the receiver collar, allow for growth if your pet is young or grows a thick winter coat. Mark the desired length of the receiver collar and cut off the excess. Before placing the receiver collar onto your pet, seal the edge of the cut collar by applying a flame along the frayed edge. Allowing your pet to wear the receiver collar indoors while turned on may result in accidental activation of the receiver collar. While physically close to the outside door, leaving the house, place the receiver collar on your pet. Fit the collar correctly with the PetSafe logo upright, facing your dog's chin. Press and hold the mode button until a 2-beep sound and a green LED comes on. Release the button, the receiver is now on. While physically close to the outside door, entering the house, do not allow your pet to roam inside the house with the receiver collar turned on. Either remove the receiver collar or turn it off. Press and hold the mode button down for 5 seconds. The red LED will be on during this time. The red LED will then turn off with a 2-beep sound. All receiver LEDs will stay off, indicating that the receiver is off. Now that you've installed your system, you are ready to train your pet. It usually takes 2 to 3 weeks for your pet to fully understand the system, and then you'll be able to rest easy knowing your pet is safe in your yard.